Amidst the endless expanse of asphalt and the steady hum of traffic, the Interstate 5 stretched like a ribbon of concrete through the heart of California. It was a thoroughfare of dreams and destinies, connecting distant cities and towns in a seamless tapestry of motion and momentum. Yet, beneath its veneer of efficiency and progress, the highway harbored secrets darker than the shadows cast by passing cars. One chilly evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the indigo sky, a young woman named Sarah found herself cruising along the I-5, her headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope in an otherwise desolate landscape. She was on her way home from a weekend trip to visit her family, the warmth of their embrace still lingering in her heart as she navigated the lonely stretch of road. With a weary sigh, Sarah spotted a sign indicating the presence of a rest area up ahead. Grateful for the opportunity to stretch her legs and refill her gas tank, she veered off the highway and pulled into the dimly lit parking lot of the rest area. As she stepped out of her car and stretched her limbs, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that prickled at the back of her neck like icy fingers. Brushing aside her apprehension, Sarah made her way towards the gas station, the soft glow of the fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the pavement. As she reached for the pump and began to fill her tank, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a sense of foreboding settling over her like a heavy shroud. Unbeknownst to Sarah, lurking in the shadows of the rest area, a predator lay in wait, his eyes gleaming with malice as he watched her every move. He had been stalking the highways and byways of California for months, preying on unsuspecting victims with a ruthlessness born of desperation and depravity. Known only as the I-5 Killer, he had earned his moniker through a string of brutal murders that had sent shockwaves of fear rippling through the communities along the interstate. His methods were as cunning as they were cruel, his victims chosen at random and dispatched with ruthless efficiency. As Sarah finished filling her tank and prepared to return to her car, a sudden movement caught her eye, a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, his presence sending a chill down her spine. Instinctively, she reached for her keys, her heart hammering in her chest as she prepared to make a hasty retreat. But before she could take a single step, the figure stepped out of the shadows, his face obscured by the brim of his baseball cap and the collar of his jacket. A wave of fear washed over Sarah as she found herself face to face with the I-5 Killer himself, his eyes burning with a predatory intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as Sarah stared into the abyss of the killer's gaze, her mind racing with the realization of the danger she was in. With a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins, she turned and fled, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the deserted parking lot as she ran for her life. Miraculously, Sarah managed to reach her car and slam the door shut just as the killer lunged for her, his fingers grazing the door handle with chilling proximity. With trembling hands, she fumbled for her keys and jammed them into the ignition, the engine roaring to life as she peeled out of the rest area with tires screeching and heart pounding in her chest. As she merged back onto the I-5, Sarah cast a terrified glance in her rearview mirror, half expecting to see the killer's sinister silhouette looming in the darkness behind her. But the parking lot was empty, the only sign of life the flickering of the gas station lights as they faded into the distance. For hours, Sarah drove on in a state of shock and disbelief, her mind reeling from the encounter with the I-5 Killer. She couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes upon her, his presence lurking in the shadows like a malevolent specter haunting her every thought. Eventually, she reached the safety of her own home, her hands trembling as she fumbled for her keys and stumbled through the door. Collapsing onto the couch, she buried her face in her hands and wept, the weight of what could have been pressing down on her like a leaden cloak. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah struggled to make sense of the ordeal she had endured. She found herself plagued by nightmares, the image of the killer's face burned into her mind like a brand, his eyes haunting her even in the light of day. Then, one fateful evening, as Sarah sat huddled in front of the television with a mug of tea clutched in her trembling hands, a news bulletin flashed across the screen. The I-5 Killer had been apprehended, his reign of terror brought to an end by the relentless efforts of law enforcement. As Sarah watched in disbelief, her heart pounding in her chest, she felt a flood of relief wash over her like a tidal wave. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she realized the magnitude of what had happened. She had narrowly escaped becoming one of the killer's victims, her life spared by mere seconds and inches. In the days that followed, Sarah struggled to come to terms with the enormity of what had happened. She found herself grappling with feelings of survivor's guilt, haunted by the knowledge that others had not been as fortunate as she had been. But amidst the darkness, there was also light, the knowledge that she had escaped the clutches of death and emerged stronger for having faced the ultimate test of her courage and resilience. And though the memory of that chilling encounter would linger with her for the rest of her days, Sarah refused to let it define her, choosing instead to embrace the gift of life with a newfound appreciation for its fragility and preciousness.